Okay, here we are. It's been a while since I had the pleasure to talk to you, my friend, Mr. Olly Smith. How are you, my friend? Welcome to the roller coaster.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me. I'm all good. I'm all good.
Good stuff, man. Gosh, it's been ages since I saw you, brother. When was the last time? I think you came around uh Diorama here in at Regent's Place in London, and we went out for a quick drink, wasn't it? That's already like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, but then didn't you come to that Camden gig last
Oh,
year?
very true. Yes,
The
exactly.
Black is it the Black Heart
The Black
Camden?
Heart. Yeah, the Black Heart. And you were
Playing there
playing
again, by the way, on
when?
14th of April.
14th of April.
Yeah,
Great. It's Monday
save it
night,
in the
right?
calendar.
It's a Monday evening, isn't it?
No, it's Saturday.
Is it a Saturday? Let me just check. It's just because I'm gonna be
Let me just check, just in case I've got it wrong.
Uh, no, the reason why I said let me just check, it's because I'm going on tour next
Oh,
month,
cool.
and I'm coming back to London only on the 23rd of April.
Well, that's not
So on the
that's not going to work out.
so, and the reason why I ask is
You won't be
because
there then.
I will not be there, unfortunately. The reason I asked was because on the 17th we are playing London at the Underworld. And
Oh,
for
okay,
some
cool.
reason, I imagined that the 14th was the 16th, which is a Monday. And the Monday before the London show, we're going to be in London. So that's a day off. And I was like, wow, that would
Ah, it
have
makes
been
sense.
amazing, to be able to, like, on the day off, squeeze in a gig of my
Yeah,
bro,
man.
Mr. Olly Smith, Wicked Stone. Oh, but that's great, man. Where, where are you guys playing in London? Is it going to be the Blackheart again?
It's the same place, yeah, same venue.
Cool. Cool. So what's going on with Wicked Stone these days, man? Like, fuck, that album is really well produced, really good. I remember listening to some rough mixes while we were in LA back
Yeah, on
in
the way down
yeah
to Nam.
on the
I
way
remember
down to
that.
Nam. Exactly. Yeah, that was 2016, if I'm correct.
It was. And that was the first mixes we got, actually. So it wasn't even mastered at that point. It was just the very first mixes. So it was like exciting to kind of get them through. And I remember because I was trying to download them on my phone, wasn't I? Then
Mm.
trying to connect it to the car's, stereo. And then, yeah, finally it's working, you know. Oh, and
Yeah.
it sounds good, you know. It was like quite an exciting moment. But that was the first two songs off the album. But we released the album last year in October. Done a few gigs at the back end of the year, and we haven't done any gigs this year yet, but they start next week, and then we've got them booked up throughout the rest of the year. So no sort of specific tours, but they're just kind of like there's quite a few gigs lined up, which is cool.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Are you guys working in partnership with any agents at the moment, or you guys basically self-conducting the business yourselves?
Yeah, doing it all ourselves at the moment. We've not really tried to find management or agents.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, we've just kind of sort of bumbled along a little bit by ourselves, doing stuff to get us up and running. But at some point, we're going to need to do that because there's only so much you can do yourselves, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'm fully aware of that. And well, but that's really good that you guys are actually working towards getting some gigs together and yeah, do some. Well, it's always good to play London, but getting out there is always important as well to get the band well somehow in the circuit. If there's any rock metal circuit these days, because I am completely unaware. Like London, for example, is just absolutely dreadful. It's just there's nothing happening, absolutely nothing happening. Back in 2013, when 6 Hours Sundown was still going, and I had my band Stormborn and all that. We still had Intrepid Fox, Purple Turtle in Camden. There were quite a few small venues with regular gigs taking place. But nowadays, if I say, right, I want to go and see some rock bands, live rock bands, good rock bands, in London, where do I go? I don't know. There's no place to go. It's big shame. I mean, I'm a bit like sometimes nostalgia walking around Tottenham Court Road area. I saw a picture of the old Astoria Theatre the other day, and I was like, wow, back
Mm.
in early 2000s, that was a very, very nice part of town, you know, buzzing, musicians everywhere. There was still something going. But nowadays, man, it's so, I feel so, so sad, you know, so, so sad. But
It's a real shame because the Astoria was like the hub of that area, wasn't it? Because
hmm
it wasn't overly sized. You know, it was a good size. I mean, you got really good bands playing,
yeah,
but it had that kind of mid-level band, so there was a frequency of gigs, wasn't there? So
hmm
every week there would be a few gigs, and generally the kind of you know, rock and metal music, there would be someone of a really worthy name playing there every week, wouldn't there? You know,
exactly.
and it was always a great place. I love that venue, and loads of people did, obviously. And obviously, it's sad that it's now just. Well, I've not seen it for a while, but it was just a building site when I was last there. You know.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just the whole area has changed, you know, in the same way that Camden is changing, and lots of other areas of London are changing. And I find really it's funny because people do come to England and to London for several different reasons. But one of the reasons that people do come to this country is because of its cultural heritage, and that includes obviously music and especially rock and metal, because all of the rock giants, if not all, but like the huge vast majority of them, come from England. You know, so not preserving those venues is something that really, really. I can't really understand. You go to Los Angeles, for instance, as we just mentioned it, that we were there at going to NAMM a couple of years ago. You still have the venues there, you know, regardless of how hard it is to maintain those things those days. You still have regular gigs, you still have regular jams. There's still something going on, you know. If you want to try and do something, there are ways to do it. Whereas here in London, gosh, you can't even find musicians around to put a band together.
No, but then I remember being in LA, and there would be people that lived there and had lived there for a long time that would also kind of give the same statement that how things have changed and it's not what it used to be. And it's hard to know whether it's just a case of, you know, when you get a bit older, you have the nostalgia from when you are younger. And it'd be interesting to know what like a 17, 18-year-old would feel in London now, whether they would feel that there's something happening or not. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's, I
it's a
don't
good
know.
point.
Because in LA, I agree. You know, when we were there, it was just nice to be able to go to the places we went, and there would be something happening. But then there would be other times when I was there just a bit before you, and obviously after you, where I was going to like this sort of list of venues that I'd kind of researched before. And when you go there, it's like, well, I've been told this place is a happening place, and you go in and there's like kind of 25 people in
Hmm.
there, and you think, well, okay, maybe it is a happening place, but it's not quite. You know, when someone says it's one of the places to go,
Hmm.
you have a certain image of what that's going to be like, and when you turn up and it's 25 people there, you think,
Yeah.
you know, did I come on the wrong night, or did I, you know, did I get the wrong venue? Have I gone around the back and it's at the front? This really cool part, but I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it? I think the venues that are still going, and obviously the Strip, you know, it's got like the Whiskey on it, which obviously has great gigs still, and you know, there's all that going on in LA. But by all accounts, it seems that it has changed a bit there as well. And there's always that sort of kind of negative view that rock and metal is sort of dead or something like that, or it's not what it once used to be. But then I kind of get confused by that because it feels like there's more bands coming out of that genre than there ever has been. So to say it's dead and on its way to decline, I find that really hard to understand. Yet at the same time, like you're saying, when you go out in London, where are these bands? Where are these gigs? It's just a bit of it seems all a bit sort of a mystery, doesn't it?
Yes, I agree. I agree with completely. Well, unfortunately, not much that we ourselves can do in regards of that, right? So the only thing we can actually do is to keep pursuing dreams and playing music and working towards our our own personal goals. And I believe that's what you've been doing with Wicked Stone. And you mentioned it to me off air earlier on that you have another couple of bands as well, brother, that you've been fooling around with. Tell me
Yeah,
more.
just a couple of covers bands. To be honest, Thumpscrew, there's a band called Thumpscrew I play in, which is like a metal covers band.
Mm-hmm.
And that started up actually after 6 Hour Sundown finished, because that was at the end of 2012, if I remember rightly. And at very beginning 2013, the guys that were forming this sort of covers band just gave me a call and just said, we need a guitarist, because I'm a drummer in Wicked Stone, but I also play guitar. So when the whole thing with Lauren and 6 Hour Sundown came to an end, it kind of, you know, threw things upside down for me a little bit, and I didn't really know what to do and what I was going to do next, that kind of thing. So to get offered to play in a covers band was the perfect thing I needed at that time, because it wasn't a case of right, we're starting out from the bottom again, guys. Come on, it's going to take on the world. Because I did get a couple of offers from bands at the time that were sort of setting out on that kind of course, and I had to turn them down because I was just like, as much as I love your music, as much as I would love to do it, I'm the wrong guy for the job at the moment, because I can't think of anything like that. I needed something to keep me gigging, to keep me active, but at the same time to not actually have to think about too much, you know, and not have that worry about, you know, what you're going to do next, what's your next plan. All you have to worry about is learning a few songs, going out and having fun and a couple of beers and do a few gigs, and that's all you need to do. And actually, you know, you go and do, you know, when you're a normal band writing your own stuff, you go out and often you're playing gigs for nothing, you know. You might be lucky to get petrol money, but you go and do covers and all of a sudden you all get £50 each. I was like, wow, I feel like a millionaire all of a sudden, you know. All these years where you might be paying for nothing, and then you do this easy kind of covers gig and you get fucking money for it. It just seems kind of bizarre, but so that's what happened, and that actually started 5 years ago. So we kind of played maybe once every couple of weeks in Kent, you know, just different rock and metal pubs and bars, that kind of thing. And the other gig, the other band I play is a band called WYSIWYG, which stands for WYSIWYG. It stands for what you see is what you get. Because basically, there's three of us that play that. We end up doing about 3 or 4 gigs a year. That's just how it's gone so far. We do covers, but we don't just do metal. We kind of do sort of a bit of a mixture of some classic rock, and then you do like, you know, we do like a rocked up version of an Adele song, and you know, we kind of got a bit of a mix and match. And
oh, nice. That's interesting. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, well, the guys I play in the band with are like, this, as I said, there's 3 of us. I play guitar, and then there's Jamie and Simon, and those guys I used to play in my old band called Cubic Space Division. And obviously we were doing our own stuff, and we were out, you know.
Which takes us back to 2003, is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, 2000 well, that's when we released our album.
Was that your very first band?
Well, I played in bands when I was younger. So like when I first started out, I think, because it's funny, because this July will be 20 years since my first ever gig that I played.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. You know, when you sort of...
We're getting old, brother. We're getting old.
I know. Well, it's that sort of time in life where you go, oh yeah, that was 10 years ago. And you go, no, it must have been more than... And you go, no, it was 20 years ago. It was 20 fucking years ago. Like, how the fuck did that happen? So yeah, when I sort of realised that, I kind of felt a bit old when I thought of, you know, being 15 and doing my first gig. But at the same time, I kind of felt honoured that I was still 20 years down the line, still doing it, and all the different people you meet on the way and the adventures you have. And I'm still doing it, and it's that was exciting. But that was when I first did my first band. We were called Demon Seed.
Wow, Demon Seed.
Demon Seed, which is about
Sounds
as metal
like
a name as you can ask
yeah,
for.
I was going to say that.
And so I did that for a couple of years in another couple of local bands. But then Cubic Space Division formed in 2001, and we were together like 5 years. But our album came out in 2003.
Yeah, you got the album released via Undergroove Records.
Exactly, and they're still going actually. I think they might have had a little patch where they weren't releasing anything, but I've been seeing some stuff recently that they've got a couple of bands on their roster again, I think.
Is there any of that material available online?
Cubic Space Division is, yeah. You can get it on. I don't know if you can get it on Apple Music, but you can definitely get it on Spotify.
Oh, interesting, nice, cool.
Yeah, so it's cool because it's the band. You know, it's difficult because you know, we're an underground band.
Mm-hmm.
But like any underground band, you get really hardcore fans. You know, it's just because you're not headlining the O2 doesn't mean that the people out there that really, really care about everything you're doing and releasing and all the gigs you're playing. So it was quite like an interesting thing when we split up, because we did our final gig in Ashford in Kent. That was just where we ended, and we had some people come down from like Southampton and up north to come and see because they were like they loved us so much, to
What year
come
was
and
that?
see our fun.
What year did
2006.
Right. Okay.
So 2006 we finished,
Yeah.
and that was again like another thing where you come out the other side and you're like, wow, what do I do now? But it was a bit different for me then because in 2006 I was like 24 years old, so you're still quite
exactly.
young.
What was going on? What was
ahead of
going on? I want to actually ask you a couple of questions before I dive into that transition from 2006 to 2006 and 2007. When did you start actually playing music? Because you play guitar, you play drums, you sing, you write songs, and what was the first instrument you picked up, and at what age did that happen?
It happened basically when I was younger. None of my family are particularly into music. They listen to the radio, but they don't have like bands or a certain style of music they love or anything like that. No one else is a musician in my family. So when I was growing up, music wasn't necessarily a massive part of it. When you read interviews of people, it's like, my dad was a jazz musician, and then I kind of picked that up, and then I got into rock and metal. Well, I had none of that going on. So when I was growing up, I quite liked sport as a sort of like, when I was at primary school going into secondary school. I wasn't ever very good at it, but I quite liked playing football when I played cricket, and I played these different sports through school.
You did some running as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that was later. I never did anything when I was that young, actually.
Right.
That was more of I'm kind of putting on a bit of weight. I need to kind of get it off.
It's a good way to lose weight, I must say.
Yeah, it certainly is, yeah. So that came a bit later. But what happened was when I was about, I think that's 12 or 13, I had a problem with my knees. And it's this weird, bizarre named thing called Osgood Schlatter's disease.
Jeez.
Yes, try and say that when you've had a couple of beers. So it was this weird thing, and it sounds really, because it's like these weird names and words put together. You're like, oh my God, that sounds horrendous. Actually, all it was is that it's part of your knees that sort of, I don't really know the detail of it, but all I know is that the way the bones form together, I think it's something like that, and it causes a lot of pain. So when you're running, playing football, but also I remember one time when I was young, I sat down on a chair next to my bed and I hit my knee against my mattress, and I was in tears with the pain.
Wow.
Which is weird because I can't even imagine that now, and so you go to the doctors, you go to specialists, and basically what they said was to simply to get past this, you just have to not do any sport for a year. And at that time for me, it was like being told now that I can't play drums for a year or I can't play guitar for a year. It's horrendous. I was devastated. So my mum said to me, what would you like to do instead of sport? What would you like to do? And I said, play drums. And she said, you can't play drums in the house. And I was like, okay, play guitar. And she said, you can play guitar. I was like, cool. So that's what set me on that path. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because even though none of my family were into music, what had happened a few years previously, when Freddie Mercury died, obviously Queen re-released Bohemian Rhapsody. And again, being a radio listener, I'd never heard anything like that in my life. As a 9 or 10-year-old, whatever I was at the time, I'd never heard anything like it, and it blew my mind because I loved it so much.
Were you listening to any kind of music prior to it yourself, like anything in particular?
Nothing in particular, just what was ever on the, whatever was on the radio, and again, not even that much of it, but at that time, it was probably like the Madonnas of the world, they were like the big players in the radio at that time, do you know what I mean? But it was always like commercial, local radio, so it wasn't even, you wouldn't even hear a Bohemian Rhapsody just played casually, because Bohemian Rhapsody had been out for 20 years at that point anyway, so it was not on a playlist of any radio station at that time.
Yeah.
So when they re-released that, I blew my mind. And at the time, my mum, I lived with my mum, and when I finished school in the evenings, I used to go to a childminder just for a couple of hours until my mum finished work, so she picked me up and then we went home. And I remember saying to my childminder, Sue, I said, I love this song that I've heard. And she's like, oh, Queen, yeah, I've got that on tape. And I was like, you've got it? How have you got that? I was so young and innocent. I was just like, how have you? I just thought they played things on the radio. I didn't know really. You've got a Queen cassette tape? And she was like, yeah. So I recorded it, and it's Queen's Greatest Hits 1. And then that was really the life-changing thing because I loved the whole album. And then sort of still didn't kind of get fully into music at that point. But it was a couple of months later, then the Freddie Mercury tribute concert happened, and Metallica opened the show,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, that was like blew my mind, you know.
Yeah.
And it took a couple of years again from that point to sort of like bump into a friend from my primary school who had then obviously started, you know, we were at that point 12 or 13, getting into this kind of metal music. He goes, I've got loads of Metallica tapes, and I was like, oh. So he recorded them all, and then that was kind of where it all starts from. So it was around then. Then the problem with my knees, and then I started playing guitar, and basically I wanted to play like James Hetfield on guitar and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and then
really
it evolved
cool.
from there. Yeah, so that's how it works out. So it's like that kind of classic, you know, without sort of sounding too dramatic, that tragedy of that, you know, my heartbreak of not being able to play
So in
sport
many
for a year. What was I going to do?
in many
You know?
ways, your mom was really supportive in regards of music, because she was, well, number one, she was very supportive to you, asking what would you like to do instead of playing sports, and then you chose to a guitar, and I presume it was an acoustic guitar that she gave it to you, or was it actually an electric guitar?
No, well, it was interesting because at the time she worked with a guy called Keith, and he played electric guitar, and he had a spare. I think it was called a Marlin Sidewinder. Was the guitar,
Hmm.
and he was just like, obviously said to my mum. Well, I don't think she ever told me this, but I can imagine a conversation with something like, "Don't spend any money, because if he goes off the idea in a couple of months, it'll just be a waste.
Yeah.
So just let him borrow that guitar, just see how he gets on." I was like addicted to it. So it was maybe half a year later for my birthday. My birthday's in November, so my mum kind of combined the birthday and Christmas present and bought me an Epiphone SG, and I still have that guitar. And I still use it more than any other guitar to this day,
Do
actually.
you?
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
that's
still got the same
so
guitar.
cool, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so it's over 20 years old, and it's had a couple of adaptations. I've got different pickups in there, but for the most part, it's just
That's
that
so
very first
nice.
guitar, you know.
That's really, really cool. So you always had a good actually relationship with your parents, your mom in particular.
Absolutely, yeah. My mum and dad. You know, my mum and dad divorced when I was young, but they've both been supportive for me the music thing in different ways, really.
Mm.
My mum, like you were just saying, it was there at the beginning
Yeah.
to because I live with my mum. I used to visit my dad, so all my stuff was ultimately at my mum's house, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she then encouraged me. I had like guitar lessons, and she used to kind of take me there, pick me up every time, and pay for the lessons, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's
And
so nice. Really, really
yeah, so the
cool.
support was there absolutely from her from the
She
beginning, you know.
sounds
And
like a great, great mom. She
yeah,
does.
absolutely. And it's funny because obviously, like I say, none of them are musicians or anything, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
but they could see obviously she could see the passion in me and for music, so she kind of supported that, which I'm really grateful for, obviously, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, now I can see where all the amazingness of Olly Smith must come from. Great parenting.
Yeah, that's it, man. Yeah.
Brother, so well, then back to 2006, Cubic Space Division, parting ways, and then in 2007, how did you first get the job? How did you become backline tech for the Lauren Harris band?
uh, Basically, I think what happened after Cubic Space Division split up, I think actually at the time I just kind of thought, well, I'm just going to give myself a few months from music, you know. Just at the time I put on a bit of weight, and that was when I started getting into boxing and that kind of thing, because I thought I just need to do a sport. I want to lose weight. I've been told boxing training was very good, so I thought I'd just dabble in that, you know. I never
Mm-hmm.
competed in boxing or anything like that, but I just went for the training. So I kind of, you know, those kind of evenings where, you know, once upon a time I was going to band practices, rehearsals, that kind of thing. I just used that time almost to kind of physically shape up, you know, just give myself a few months.
Yeah.
Later on that year or early the following year, a good friend of mine, Simon Sales, was like wanting to start up a band, and I'd always loved drums, even though I didn't really play drums or have a drum kit or anything. But I'd always at rehearsals with my old bands, you know, when you have a break, I used to not have a break. I used to come in and say to the drummer, "Can I just have a go on your kit?" You know, because I used to love playing drums. You know, it was always like a fascination I had. But the reason why my mum I couldn't have a drum kit when I was younger was obviously for the volume reasons and the space in the house. You know, we didn't have a tiny house, but we didn't have a massive house, and you know, we were a part of a housing estate, so you can't really, you know, you
Gosh,
can
yeah.
upset a lot of people by having drums, you know.
Absolutely.
So that pushed off the drum bit, but my obsession with it was still there. So when he said he was like looking to start up a band, you know, I was like, well, we'll find a rehearsal room that's got a kit, and I'll just try and have a blag on the drums. So I'm not saying I'm going to be very good at it, but let's just give it a try. And actually, at that time, 2006 and 7, it developed quite nicely. My skills of drumming kind of came together because I was actually practicing regularly, not just, the drummer for my band's drum kit for 20 minutes in the middle of a band practice. So that kind of evolved, and we were doing some gigs, and I was, now all of a sudden I've become a drummer. So 2006 and 7, I was working at just a daytime job, insurance company job, and lovely people I worked with, but I could not stand the job. I was bored out of my mind every day, dreaming of, bigger and better things in the musical world. And a good friend of mine, Sharon Richardson, and her husband and mine are good friends, and they run a music, booking agents. They work for a bigger booking agent now, but they had their own company, music management, booking agents. And she called me up and said, Ollie, could you be a guitar and drum tech? And I was like, right now, I'll be anything you want me to be. If it means getting out of this fucking job. She didn't say who it was for. She just said, could you be a guitar and drum tech? And I said, yeah. She said, okay, well, look, give me a call back at lunchtime. Because it was like something like 9:30 in the morning. Another day starts and you're walking through the office thinking, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And so I spoke to her at lunchtime and she said who it was for. And I was like, wow. I was like, well, obviously I can do it. She said, it's for Lauren Harris and it's going to be on the Maiden tour next year, the plane tour. I was like, wow. I'll do whatever it takes to do, I will do whatever it takes to do that job.
Mm-hmm.
And first things I had to learn how to be a guitar and drum tech because I'd never done anything like that. Obviously, when you play those instruments, you have sort of some knowledge on how to repair certain bits, but I never had overly extensive knowledge on that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Drums are a fraction easier to fix up than sort of guitar amps, and the wiring of a guitar amp or that kind of thing. But I've got a friend of mine that was doing some teching at the time, so I thought, I got in touch with him and got some heads up advice of what I needed to do. But the whole premise is that I couldn't just go and do the Maiden tour. There was a couple of tours Lauren was doing before. So in November 2007, she did her own tour, like for a week, that was UK pubs and clubs, and it culminated in Hard Rock Hell. And so I did that. That seemed to go all right. And then a couple of weeks later, Lauren supported Thunder.
And you were playing guitar in the band at this
No,
point?
no, no, no. It was just teching.
Right.
It was just teching. I was no part of the musical side of it.
Okay.
So that all happened. Then it went well enough. There was a few little teething problems. A couple of guys in the band were sort of a bit worried about my confidence and skill levels, but in the end, I think Sharon kind of flew the flag for me, and I think Steve Harris was kind of more than happy for me to be yes, okay, I might not be the most experienced guy in the world, but I'll learn as the job goes on, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went on the Iron Maiden tour, the plane tour, and I was the backline tech for Lauren Harris band on that, which obviously goes without saying that was incredible. Because
So you did basically that Somewhere Back in Time tour, which started back in 2008 with the whole Iron Maiden playing and everything. You started that tour from the very beginning.
absolutely the very start. So the first stop, if my memory serves me correctly, was India, in Mumbai, and yeah, it was incredible because as much as I'd gone to a few different holiday destinations in my life, I'd never really traveled around that much. So all of a sudden to land in India, you're like, wow, this is incredible. And then the next stop was Australia, but we were there from the very start. So because Maiden have done a few plane tours at this stage, but back then that was their very first tour that they'd gone on their own plane, where Bruce was sort of piloting for some of the trips. Before that, they'd flown in planes to gigs, but they'd never had the one plane where all their equipment and all their crew and band members were all on the same plane. So we were there for that very first plane tour. So it was absolutely mind blowing to be there.
What was what were the days like? I mean, did you have you obviously had itineraries and stuff, but was it every day different from the other, or did you guys kind of like, okay, we landed, we go to the hotel, we check in, we have a couple of hours to rest, and then we go to the venue and start setting up, and once you are at the venue, you stayed at the venue, you lunched and dinner at the venue. What was it like?
Every day is kind of a bit different because although it's there was quite a few dates on the tour. There was also, there's travel days, then there's day off, then there's gig day. There's other times where there's a travel day and it's a gig day the following day. So there's some cities you land in, you get to the hotel late in the day, you might have some dinner, you wake up next day, you're taken to the venue, and then you're at the gig all day. Following morning you might fly out, so you don't really see the place that much. And there's other places you're there for a few days and you really get to kind of do some sightseeing. But in terms of like a normal scenario, you get picked up from the hotel, driven to the hotel. Some countries you'd have a sort of special lenience in the sense that you still have to still be a security process, but you might just get taken onto the runway, straight onto the plane, and then take off. There's other countries where you go through the airport, you're doing the same thing as everyone else has to do. Flights varied for lengths, depends obviously how far you're traveling. Sometimes they're going to be like 10, 11, 12-hour flights, sometimes they're an hour. Then you kind of get there, you get taken to the hotel, depends on what time you get there. Me and Lauren and Kerry would often hang out. That's Kerry's Lauren's sister, and Justin, who's Yannick's guitar tech, because we're all very similar age groups, so we would often kind of go out exploring in the city and doing bits and pieces. And then you might go and grab some dinner, do a bit more exploring, and then next day's gig day. So you kind of get there, everyone gets there at different points. If you're the Iron Maiden Crüe guys, in the sense that you're setting up the stage, they get there very first thing, as you can imagine. The backline techs get there a few hours later. Sound check might happen mid-late afternoon, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's always catering on site, and you get lunches and dinners. But it was always great because obviously once Lauren finished and I'd done my job, packed everything up, then I get to see Maiden every night, which I think obviously they're a great band, but because you kind of almost get a bit hardened to it because you see it every night. But when I was younger, growing up, Maiden were, I was a massive fan of them, so.
Way better than being stuck in the office of that insurance company, I bet.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. I certainly didn't look back, that's for sure.
And in terms of basically lobby calls, hotel calls, and stuff like that, does people just basically follow what's on the itinerary, and everybody respects that? How does that work? Do you have to that 2 p.m. you kind of have to be in the hotel hall, so there'll be a van to take you to the venue and stuff like that. So it's kind of like I imagine that after a few shows, things just work just automatically, basically. Even the setting up of the stage, the setting up of the drum kit, changing drum skins, and all that business.
Yeah, the bus call thing is it's really paid notice to, because if the bus calls at 9 in the morning, you've got to be there at 9 in the morning. It's like it's not like that kind of, oh man, we'll turn up 30 minutes late, 40 minutes late. It's not like that. It works like a much tighter machine. I suppose it's like that unspoken culture that you don't let the side down. Do you know what I mean? As much as it's kind of like, people might have had a few beers the night before or what have you, you've still got to deliver the goods the next day.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, it was in Tokyo, there was a free bar to celebrate finishing the end of the tour, and fuck man, it was when I was teching as well. And I remember Tommy, Lauren's drummer at the time, I think he organised, I don't know if he called us up because he'd gone home earlier. He didn't want to stay out and kind of into the early hours, so he'd had a few beers and kind of called it quits at a sensible time. He knew the rest of us were going to get messy, and I remember him calling up in the morning, and I was so drunk that when I answered the phone, he must have said it. He went, "Hey brother, just want to make sure you're up." And I was like, "Yeah, no, cool." Put the phone straight down on him. Then the alarm call comes from the hotel reception, and I was like, "Yeah," put the phone straight down, went to sleep. And literally, I was sharing a room with Greg, who's the tour manager. Fuck, we woke up. It was like we had 1 minute to be downstairs for the bus call. It was unbelievable. But all I can say is, you get on the bus, and no one has to go at you, but you're not very popular in that moment, and you're kind of the butt of a few snide remarks from the rest of the Maiden crew, and you're kind of let to know indirectly that wasn't a very sensible thing to do.
Right.
So from then on, when there's a free bar, you just make sure you set 3 or 4 alarms at the other side of the room, so you have to get out of bed and have to get up and get on with it.
Yeah.
So it does work like a machine, and that's why it's so effective. And the whole Maiden show works as a machine, doesn't it? When you go and watch them play, it's really slick production, isn't it? Everything happens at the right moment, at the right time, and the day leading up to it is no different, really. Everyone obviously is at the top of their game in terms of the drum tech, you know, the guitar techs, all of them, you know, they're not just kind of like, they're not there working it out like I was as a tech, you know, that they've worked it all out already. They're the top of the game and they've got a good skill set.
Yeah. Do they do the crew have any sort of rules? For example, say, I don't know, during working hours, people don't drink and don't smoke, for example, or is people allowed to say, okay, you finish setting up the whole gear, the show is ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna have a beer now. Just, I mean, when I say have a beer, it's like literally have a beer, not like sit down and knock down a few beers and then go do the show. Do they have any kind of rules like that, or people are simply just professionals and they just leave that for literally end of the day when the whole job is done?
I don't know about that actually. I wasn't really ever conscious of the fact that there may have been a rule, but I think it was the latter of what you said, that they're professional and they wouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying they wouldn't have had a beer with their dinner. I didn't really, you know, it's a few years ago now. I don't really notice.
Yeah.
But the thing is, even when things are set up, that's only kind of quarter of the job. Because when they're on stage, the band, you know, that's really the bigger part of the job, because that's when you've got to be at your sharpest to make sure that if anything's going wrong, that you fix it really quick. And if you've had a couple of beers, you're not going to be quite as responsive. You know?
Yeah, no, of course, absolutely. Ollie, and then, well, so that was 2008 and 2009. So that was like a couple of years of your life basically sorted. But then the tour eventually came to an end, and then did you go back to Folkestone? What did you have anything lined up? Did they mention anything about the upcoming 2010 tour? How did that transition happen?
Well, at the end of 2008, Tommy, their drummer, was kind of, you know, like, you know, he was a few years older than the rest of the band, and I think initially when he was involved with Lauren's stuff, you know, the first album, he hadn't intended to go and be part of the live band. He'd sort of been there as almost like a mentor to kind of take her on tour, get her up and running. So later on, he was deciding he wasn't going to be the drummer for the following year's tour, so 2009, you know. So Lauren asked if I'd be interested in playing in the band. I'd already specified that I would, you know, if you ever need a drummer, let me, you know, if you run auditions, let me know, you know. You know, it was like, you know, I've been playing drums for a couple of years, you know. As I say, I've been playing drums for many years, but only really taking it seriously those couple of years, you know. So at that point, I was really upping my skill game, really, you know, I wasn't playing guitar at all at that point, other than maybe when I was setting up Rich's guitar and that kind of thing. You might have a little play, you know. But when I was at home, drumming was my focus. So when it got to the end of 2008, that's when I auditioned for Lauren. I got the job. So on the 2009 playing tour, I was the drummer in that band.
Oh,
you know,
I see. Right.
So that's when I was doing that. So the next year's playing tour, Lauren supported Maiden the same way she had the year before, but I was now drumming. So then I'm doing obviously those incredible shows, you know. From that point, yeah, I came back, but then we had like another tour with Lauren lined up with Mötley Crüe in the summer of 2009. But we'd also, at the end of the 2009 Maiden Plane tour, we had gone in the studio with Kevin Shirley and recorded an album. So whilst we were on tour with Maiden...
Was that one recorded at a Compass Point in Nassau?
Yeah, exactly, Compass Point. So we'd just started what had happened was, when I joined the band, Richie had started writing a couple of songs for the next Lauren album. And then when I joined the band, then I think we did, like, you know, we started writing a couple of more songs. Maybe at that point we might have had 3 or 4 songs, you know. And then we got into January. Before the next Maiden tour, we did like a small week's tour in... we did a little bit in the UK, actually. That was my first gig, was at the Camden Underworld, actually, with Lauren. You know, being her drummer.
So that was your first gig. So, but sorry, but at when Tommy left the band, so he didn't do the shows in 2009. Did you?
No.
So did you play those shows during the Maiden Summer Back in Time tour in 2009?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Ah, right. So basically, your very first gig with Lauren was supporting Maiden, basically.
The very first one was just at the end of 2008, because the Maiden tour in 2008 had finished.
Oh, I see. Right.
in Europe at where was it? I can't remember now. Russia. It was Moscow, and that was like August time. So we came back from that tour, and I think that was 20-something of August. And then I remember coming back, and a couple of days later, I went to the Leeds and Reading Festival to watch Metallica, and then September time, I'm kind of like, well, just I'm home now. It's been a busy year, so I'm just going to chill out at home and catch up with friends and family, that kind of thing. Then I must have done the audition probably October time for Lauren. The first gig, if I remember right, was at the end of, I want to say November, I think. And we did a few gigs in the UK. But all it was just Lauren's own tour. There was no, we weren't supporting anyone. It was just Lauren just doing a few of her own UK shows. So we did London and Leeds and Glasgow, and there was somewhere else. I can't think where it was now. So I was now Lauren's drummer. And then in January, we went to Scandinavia, and we did like 3 or 4 shows in Scandinavia, just by ourselves again, headlining. And then we got onto the next Maiden tour. And after we'd been on the Maiden tour for maybe a couple of weeks, I think we were in New Zealand, and Steve came to us and said, right, I've got you booked in for the end of this tour, Compass Point Studio with Kevin Shirley for 10 or 11 days. But wow. First things first, we haven't even got an album to record. You know, we've got like three new songs or 4 new songs, you know. And we said that, but obviously Steve is a kind of very strong-headed person and doesn't see things like that as an obstacle. He just sees like that as a challenge, you know. So we were like, fuck, we've got like 8 weeks to write a whole album, basically. You know, gathering together the different ideas Richie had and Lauren had, but we got it. You know what? We got it together. You know, we had to organise a couple of rehearsal studios in Santiago and in Chile and somewhere else in Brazil, I think. I can't remember where that was, but yeah, we did a couple of like all day sessions in the rehearsal studio. But then when we finished the Maiden tour, we went straight to Compass Point Studios in Bahamas and recorded an album with Kevin Shirley. We then came back for like another 5-6 weeks, had the Mötley Crüe tour. By that point, the mixes of the album had come through, and Steve felt there was a couple of songs that weren't quite strong as the rest of it. And we'd then written a couple of new songs, and he was like, right, what we'll do is we'll get you in the studio at the end of the Mötley Crüe tour to finish the album. So we went into a studio called Black Rock Studios in Santorini, which was a new studio at that point. The only people that had recorded there was Joe Bonamassa.
Oh, wow.
He was the first band to record there, and that's his album, Black Rock, because it was named after, I think Santorini's got a nickname, Black Rock, and it was called Black Rock Studio, so his album was called Black Rock, you know. So we literally got there the day that he was literally finishing. So we had a barbecue with him and the rest of his band that night. They went home the next day, and then that's when we jumped in the studio just to do the next 2 songs that were going to be the end of Lauren's new album, you know. So that was like July, I think, 2009. And unfortunately, from that point, it kind of went a little bit downhill with the band, because there was a bit of confusion about who was going to manage, and Steve was sort of overseeing certain things, but Lauren wanted to kind of do. I think the family thing was making things a bit difficult. So she was thinking, right, I need to do this a bit more by myself, and it then meant that we sort of then tried to find managers. They didn't work out, and that kind of got us through a year and a half of not really us getting anywhere or doing anything. You know, and
So
the
that
album was
album,
just sitting there in the can, just doing nothing. You know,
that album basically is the it's the 6 Hour Sundown album that never was released, right?
well, not really, because that album was recorded under that situation, the Lauren Harris Band, with Kevin Shirley. Then later on, when me, Lauren, and Randy had sort of left the band because he was, I think, getting a bit disillusioned with how things were going management-wise, and nothing was really happening, and that kind of thing. I think he was feeling the frustration of that. So he, and the rest of us, by the way, you know, I lived in Kent, and Richie was staying at Lauren's at the time in Essex. So we are somewhat, you know, I'm like 1.5 hours away, but Randy lived in New York and still does live in New York. So it's a bit of a difficult scenario when you're in a band. The 3 of you live 1.5 hours away from each other, and then the other guy lives in the other, you know, halfway around the world. So he left the band, and then it was kind of like the new managers were kind of then saying, you know, where do you want to go with this band? What do you want to do? And then they were starting to critique the album we'd recorded already, and kind of pick holes in it to such a massive degree that we got to the point where we were just like, well, let's try and remix it then. And then that didn't work. That sort of almost made it worse. So this lovely album that you recorded in this famous studio with this amazing producer, we'd been sort of dissecting it, tearing it apart to the point that actually picking holes in so much it didn't have the same look about it and feel about it anymore, you know. And then it got to the point where we were just like, well, we just have to fucking re-record this thing. So then we re-recorded it at Steve's studio. Tony Newton recorded it, and we ultimately re-recorded the whole album with again 2 new songs actually that we'd written that we thought were kind of more fitting to where we were at musically at that point. And that album didn't fucking come out either. So we literally, here we are in 2018 talking with 2 albums sitting there that are ultimately mixed and mastered, finished, and none of them are released. No, and it's the most frustrating thing because the Kevin Shirley recording at Compass Point sounds great. It's a different kind of sound that we went on to record with Tony Newton. It was mixed by a guy called John Mitchell that had a much more modern sound to it. They both sound amazing for different reasons. You know, there's no better or worse one. But as I said, the management at the time were kind of saying, you know, where are you going with this? What are you doing? And what sort of sound are you hoping to produce? And we were trying to sort of modernize ourselves a little bit. We didn't want to be stuck in the classic rock genre unnecessarily, you know. But unfortunately, we chased our tails too many times. And then Richie got the job in Judas Priest. And so Randy had gone, Richie is now gone, and it left me and Lauren. So then we built a band.
In the oven.
2 albums sort of in the can, unreleased, and me and Lauren left. You know, half the band left. Big part of the songwriting was Richie. He'd now gone. You know, so that became a little bit of a sort of like challenge of where do we go now. But then we got a band together, and then we called it 6 Hour Sundown, and that's when we had like 3 other new guys come in, James, Tom, and Mitch. As you know, that's where I met you, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes.
You know, at that time. And then we released a couple of singles from the second version of the album, ultimately, that we'd recorded with Tony Newton, building up to releasing an album. But again, it just kind of the band got a little bit messy. And before you know it, 2012, I got a phone call. I remember really clearly, I was in France with my wife, and we were staying at our friend, my best bud, Jamie, his parents. And I got a phone call from Lauren, or a text from Lauren saying, I know you're away, but can you give me a call when you've got a moment, sort of thing. So I called her, and she was like, I just don't want to do the band anymore. And I was like, because we'd gone through the ringer a little bit over the last 18 months with it, you know, from the massive high of like, you know, doing the tours with Maiden. And I think by me joining the band, it had given him a new lease, and obviously Tommy's a great drummer and he's a great guy, and it was always great to have him about, and it was strange for him not to be about. But I think because he was always that bit older and wasn't necessarily always going to be there, because he would always claimed he wasn't going to be on the tour, wouldn't be touring with them forever. All of a sudden I was there, I was more their age, and it was like, now the band's finalised. You know, this is now Lauren's band going forward. But then it kind of like fallen apart a little bit. And then, as I say, when it came to like trying to go around the loop again, and then trying like, now we've really got to get this album out. And then you sort of get a bit disgruntled. It's hard being Lauren, because she's a great singer, she's a great person, but her dad is Steve Harris. And Steve Harris, as we all know, is like the main man of Iron Maiden. And Iron Maiden fans are like the most passionate fans in the world. But one thing they don't all have is that sort of feeling of like that they're really supportive of Maiden, but they don't necessarily share the same support for the offspring of the members of Iron Maiden, if that makes sense. So they're a little bit more cynical when they get, you know, there were some places they were pissed, you know, people were a bit pissed off that, you know, the whole nepotism thing, that they, you know, the only reason why Lauren's supporting Iron Maiden is because of Steve. And it's like, well, you know what, of course it is, but if I was Steve Harris and I had a daughter that could sing her ass off like Lauren, I would take her out on tour with me as well, you know.
Absolutely.
But anyway, it becomes very difficult, because then you're always seen as like, you know, Lauren Harris, you know, Steve's daughter. It's a bit like, I suppose, the Kelly Osbourne thing, you know, because she went through a patch of doing the whole music thing, didn't she? And you're not just Kelly Osbourne, you're always Ozzy's daughter, and you're not just Lauren Harris, you're Steve's daughter, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we kind of went through the ring, and we did some great gigs as well. You know, played some cool festivals, as you know, because you were there for a couple of them.
Yep.
And but yeah, when it got to that sort of time, 2012, August 2012, Lauren like kind of was burnt out from it. I think from this sort of inertia of not moving forward with anything happening. You know, another year goes past, and you got to think at that point, 2012, we still didn't have an album out. August 2012, we finished an album. July 2009, you know, 3 years before, and you get to a point where it's just like, this is just fucking nuts, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
there's even
and
a
that
video clip that was never released, right? From that
video,
period, a video clip
yeah,
from that period.
yeah, there was a song. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because we released the video for Jekyll and Hyde, and then we
That's right.
released the video for Shadow of My Past,
Yeah, but
and then
there's a
we had
third one.
recorded a video,
Mm-hmm.
Rain on Me. But
Exactly.
yeah, that was finished, but that never came out either. You know, it's a real shame. It's just a shame because there's great music there, and
Man,
at this point,
it is great music. I genuinely like. I always love the music. I love the band. I think there was such a great vibe. There was such a camaraderie in the band,
yeah,
and the music was great, and everyone is like devoted to it. The performance was great. Lauren was singing really well, um, and with an album, ready to go. I mean, it's really like well, obviously from my perspective as a friend and someone that was did a few shows with you guys as well. Um, it's just like I mean, I wish I could have had that album. I wish I had that album to listen nowadays, and I'm pretty sure that if that was the case, if the album was released, it would be something that it could have been built on. Something could have been built on, and I genuinely think that that should have been the path taken. But unfortunately, that might never happen. Actually, that album, those two albums, actually, which is even more frustrating. There's two versions of the album. You can't even make a very rare and collectible thing out of it. Oh, you get the version one, and you get the version two. Um, and yeah, I can only imagine how frustrating that period was for you, especially like towards the end when you got the phone call from Lauren saying that didn't want to carry on with the band, and then all of a sudden those, well, 4 years of amazing experiences and absolutely seeing yourself as fulfilling your wildest dreams and just becoming a professional musician and a touring musician, and then all of a sudden, boom, you kind of have to go back to what people say the reality. How was that period for you? I mean, can you try and describe and tell us a little bit how did you go through your emotions and psychologically, and how did you deal with everything?
yeah, it wasn't the best time of my life. You probably started seeing some of that happening anyway, because when you were kind of part of it, it was probably it was earlier 2012, wasn't it? Later 2011, and I'll just go back very quickly. Like we said about the camaraderie between us as a band. It was the same with us when we were in the band with Richie and Randy. We got on so great. We used to have so much fun together. It was just like when we were on tour, a bunch of friends just on tour. Do you know what I mean? It was,
Yeah.
you hear different dramas of bands when they're fallings out. This guy's a bit of an arsehole and he's on a different bus or he's in a different room and no one invites him out for dinner or what have you. Um, it was literally like we were friends anyway, which we weren't. I didn't know any of those guys before, but it was like we could have been friends before, and we just happened to have been given this opportunity, and now we're just going, wow, this is amazing. Look at this cool restaurant. Look at this cool country run. Look at this cool day we've had. Snorkeling off some small island in Costa Rica. All this amazing stuff you're doing as friends. And then guess what you're doing tonight? You're playing fucking in front of 50, 60, 70, 80,000 people supporting Iron Maiden, It's unbelievable. So then when the whole Maiden tours came to an end, it was a bit like, well, it didn't feel bad because we'd recorded the album, Compass Point, and it was like, right, well, our album is going to be coming out. So bearing in mind the situation you're in, fact that there is obviously the connection with Steve, all you can think is, when this album comes out, obviously you hope it's going to be the best album of the year and everyone's going to love it. But either way, you know you've got a good, busy 18 months coming up after it. Different support slots, different tours, different adventures and exciting things. So when all that started kind of becoming difficult, and obviously the album didn't come out, and then we weren't sure what was going on about management, and then that whole 2010 was just literally spent dissecting everything we'd done before, not doing any gigs in 2010 at all, waiting for something to happen. So the disillusion started a bit then, because when I was touring, obviously that's all I did. So when I came back, I wasn't working. I wasn't necessarily a rich man in the slightest, but I just had enough money to kind of get me through to the next tour. When 2010 happened, it got to, I think in 2009, I kind of had to get a sort of a part-time job until the next thing happened, So then you're kind of back to reality already at that point. And then I was kind of doing sort of casual work in 2010. Then 2011 time, when sort of Richie had left the band, and then it was kind of like we had to rebuild everything. The band is still, you're still proud of it and passionate about it, but you're sort of going, fuck, something's got to we've got to be doing something, and I don't know what it is we need to do. And you kind of like lost, quite honestly, we were lost for for a couple of years. 6 Hour Sundown stuff kind of kicked in, so that kind of gave us a sense of purpose. But again, I was still working at that time, so I couldn't be involved in everything the band were doing. I remember one day they were doing like an acoustic
What
thing.
were you doing at the time? Where were you working?
I was working at that the end of 2009 and end of 2010. I did like a Christmas temp job at Debenhams,
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting up in the morning and doing this normal day job, and you're thinking, especially the one in 2009. I'm thinking 7 months ago, I was supporting Iron Maiden. I remember one show in São Paulo. The final figure on it was something like 100,000 people. Now, when you're in a support band, as you know, not everyone watches a support band, but I can tell you in South America, 80% of an audience watches the support band. It's like a very different thing. You play like in America, it's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, out of respect to sort of say that not everyone was in there, I say we played to about 80,000 people as the support band.
Yeah.
Fast forward like 9 months, and I'm like stacking shelves in Debenhams, and you're thinking, you made reference to it, like living your wildest dreams. That was, in a weird way, it was a dream, but it was always, I knew I'd be doing it, not in an arrogant way, but there was no other option. That was always what was going to happen. However I got there, however it happened, whoever it was with, and whatever it was doing, that's what it was going to be. I was doing music for my living was always what was going to happen. So when all of a sudden you're working for Lauren, but then drumming with Lauren, playing these big shows, you've just recorded with Kevin Shirley, a fucking monster producer at Compass Point, you can't help feel that this is it now. Not like I've made it, but I'm there, and this is now what I'm going to be doing. 2009, ends, and that was probably the start of it being really fucking difficult. And then doing other jobs, I remember, like, as I was saying, like, when 6 Hour Sundown, so that was 2011. I think the guys did like an acoustic session for Total Rock Radio. I just couldn't be there. I had to get money coming in, so I had to work that day. And at that point, I was working for my brother. My brother owns like a couple of different businesses, security businesses, that kind of thing. And he was moving into new premises, so I was doing jobs like handyman kind of stuff, which again, not my natural skills at all. But he needed, like, the whole place needed to be painted, so I was kind of getting involved with that. And then the job evolved a bit. So I was at that time very casual, because I was fortunate, because it was for my brother. I was working on a very casual basis. So he would say to me on a Friday, what days are you in next week? And I'd be like, well, I've got rehearsal Monday and Tuesday, but I can do Wednesday, Thursday and Friday,
Mm-hmm.
Or it'd be like, I've got a couple of gigs next week, so I can do Monday and Tuesday, but I can't do the rest of the week. And he was cool with that, and I used to just get paid for what I could. But there were some times where I'm like, well, I need to do 3 days work next week, because I've got rent to pay, I've got bills to pay. I can't just have the whole week off. So, like, there'd be certain times like that. It was heartbreaking to know that the guys, were doing this cool acoustic session, and I couldn't be there because I had to work. It was just
Mm-hmm.
really difficult kind of time. So when you were sort of involved with us, it was probably, I remember having a couple of conversations, and obviously you're a very positive person, which I respect you for. And people have said to me I'm a very positive person, but I think probably when I first met you, I was at a bit of a lower point, and there were certain times where I was just a bit like, negative about stuff, and you were kind of there going, man, no, man, come on, you know, like you were kind of injecting that positivity, which I love about it, you know. But yeah, it was tough because it was that kind of like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? Because since I've played guitar from the age of 13, I used to stand in my bedroom playing along with Metallica, hearing, you know, to live albums sometimes, hearing that roar at the end of a song, thinking one day this is going to be me, you know. And as I say, when you're doing the Maiden support stuff and then recording this great album, you think, well, this is now I am on that path that I was always expecting to be on. And then like, it doesn't take long before you come out the other side, and then it's that. It really, I mean, some people respond differently to it. I am someone that might kind of feel a bit crap about stuff normally for a short period of time, but then I will bounce back and I will make something happen. But that one, because I guess being the drummer, and it's not my band, and you know, Lauren's ultimately in control, but at the same time, she needed someone to manage us, really, you know. And then when Steve's not going to get involved with that, and then the managers you do have, that didn't work out, you feel a little bit powerless. So as much as you try and turn things to positive, it's very difficult to control your destiny, I felt, in that moment. So when it came out the other side of all that band stuff, I kind of felt, you know, like I did not know what to do. And also at that time, I was just about to turn 30, and that I was struggling with the idea of turning 30 as well, because, which is weird, because now I'm 35, I don't really care about my age, but at that point I did, because I felt like if you haven't made it by the time you're 30, you lost the chance.
I think that's something. Yeah, our generation, because we are the same age. Because of our parents, you know, by this time they were, well, my parents for sure, they were married and had the little Carl already, and they had to basically do whatever to, you know, put food on the table and pay the bills. And we kind of grew up with this idea that by the age of 30 we should have everything figured out. But and I think that's one of the reasons why you just mentioned that you kind of had this 3.0 crisis. I did have as well a little bit.
Yeah, it's weird. I think as well, what's difficult, and I guess as humans, we, not all of us, but we kind of quantify things, don't we? So 30, because it's that round figure, because it's a milestone at age, you don't sort of say, oh, by the time I'm 29, I want to do this. Or by the time I'm 31, it's always like, oh, by the time I'm 30, I think I'll be like this. By the time I'm 40, this will be sorted. By the time I'm 50, you know, you kind of, it's just easier to round it up, isn't it? Or round it down.
It is easier to round it up, exactly. And but at the end of the day, it's just a number, isn't it? It's just like,
Exactly. And like I say, at 35 years of age, now I'm like, well, exactly, it's just a number, you know, and it doesn't really trouble me. But for some reason, I think this 30 thing, and also when you're looking around at, because you know, as much as bands should do their own thing and not worry about the other bands and what they're up to, you still are conscious of it. And when you're sort of like producing certain sounds, and you think, oh, it sounds quite like this band, and you look at those guys, you think, yeah, they're like 22 years of age, and I'm 30, and we're struggling to kind of get this thing off the ground properly. You can't help feel that it's just like it's all a bit hopeless, you know.
hmm
Yeah, you know, it's a bit of a losing battle, and that didn't help, I think, with my, as you say, 3.0 crisis.
well, but I bet you were lucky to have Sarah beside you and have a great family as well, I'm sure. And but what did you do then? What was your first job like after, okay, 6 hours and down playing that last show at Grass Pop Festival, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then the band fell apart, nothing is gonna happen, and then this is it, you know, this is it. I mean, all of that, all of the experiences, all of the touring with Iron Maiden, the snorkeling, the Compass Point studio recording, Kevin Shirley, blah 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 blah. That's it. That's it. I mean, that's part of the past. We don't know. That might come back one day. But now, this is it. I'm back in Folkestone. What do I do?
Yeah, that took a bit of a time to kind of get my head around, really, because that call from Lauren, as I say, was like August 2012. I was still working for my brother at the time, and loving to bits. And that was the plus point. I actually got to spend time with my brother, and we had a good laugh together. We had good fun, you know. So, but then it took months, really. Then of just kind of like working for him. And I was now working for. At that point, well, I've got nothing. I can't I'm not going to not work just for the sake of it. I can't, what I'm trying to say is once upon a time I was like, I can't rehearse Monday. I'm sorry, I can't work Monday because I've got rehearsal. Now I don't have rehearsal. So now I'm working full time. Now I'm doing Monday to Friday, full time work. For him. I was sort of trying to, he was trying to sort of set up like a bit of a marketing department. So I was kind of now, because I was maybe a bit better on the computers than he was or some other people working for him, I started doing that, for a few months. And it got into, then I turned 30 and then you're like, fuck me, I've just got to sort my life out. What am I going to do? And that was always, it was always a big crisis. If I don't do music, what am I going to do with my life, that was always a big trouble for me. When I was younger, I did a degree. I've got a degree in psychology. So there was always that part of me when I was younger, even though I was always aiming, I was still playing in bands at that point. That was when Cubic Space Division were releasing our album, when I was doing my degree. I always had that part of me that I thought, what, if I'm going to do anything like that, it's going to be something that's going to be maybe more helping people or something like that, or, being a counsellor or that kind of thing. But I wasn't ever sure. And then when I kind of was working for my brother doing something completely unrelated to that, when I turned 30, got into 2013, I was like, right, I need to start looking around for jobs. And a friend of mine worked for the local council for a department called Lifeline. And that, in a nutshell, is when like elderly or vulnerable people have those little red buttons that they have around their neck that they press if they, if they fall over or they need help or something like that. And the job role that came up was literally just driving around installing those for people. That's all it was around Kent,
But
and I thought, well,
really
do you know
nice,
what?
man. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's actually, so it's not a bad, it wasn't a bad job, and also sort of looked at the options of things like social work, being a social worker, those kind of things. And I thought, well, you know what? My friends not offered me the job, told me about this job role, thinks I'd be good for the job and all those kind of things. So I kind of thought, well, you know what? I'll go for it and see what happens. It was a bit more money than I was earning from my brother and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, also it sets me on more of a path towards perhaps that kind of job role that I thought might work for me,
Mm-hmm.
But I did that for a couple of years and it was a nice job. It's a great service for people. But then what actually happened, and again, it's like part of life as you go through life and, you're working things out as you go. What I found difficult about that was seeing people every day that were really ill or at the end of their lives, and that messed my head up. And I never would have imagined that before doing the job. But I used to kind of install like 5 lifelines a day. That was kind of what you did. That was 5 appointments a day. And you might go to the first person and they've got terminal cancer and they've been told they've got a couple of months to live. Then the next person might have a brain tumor and they literally could collapse at any time and die. And then the next person is 50 and they've had a stroke, exceptionally young, and their whole life's been turned upside down. And then the next person might just be a bit elderly, but just feels a bit vulnerable, so she wants a lifeline. And you do that, and you feel like it's quite a rewarding job that you've set up this device for them that's going to help them. But you do that 5 days a week, 4 weeks a month, for a year, for 18 months, for 2 years, and seeing all these people. What started happening to me was all I could see was where I was at 31 or 32 years old. All I could see at the next point was death, was illness, was vulnerability, and because I'm a bit of a sensitive person, that messed my head up a lot. So, it gave me even more respect for people like doctors and nurses that, the carers that are seeing that stuff every day and have done it for years and years and years. So it gave, because really all I was doing was just seeing these people for an hour, hearing part of the story and then going, So people that are working with that all day, every day, I have massive respect for. But as a result, it kind of messed my head up. So then it screwed my mind up about like, well, now what am I going to do now? Because this was always the thing. So not music, what am I going to do with my life? So then when you do that, you think, okay, well, I can see a path here, I can see a career. I work for the local council. There's other things you can do within this sort of area, this field. You can sort of. I was getting put forward for management training, and I thought, you know what, well, maybe this is it. And then when you start getting disillusioned with that, you're like, oh my God, now what? Now what? Come on, man, what am I going to do now? Why can't I ever just settle down with a job and fucking get on with it like everyone else seems to, So then that's when I went to LA because I was like, do you know what? I need to kind of. There's only one thing I've ever wanted to do is music, so I've got to get back to that. And like I'd always heard, like if you want to, if you get to LA, that's the place to make it happen. And and I went to LA, and that messed my head up as well because I was like, do I even want this? You know, what's going on? You know, it was a really quite honestly, you know, I get on with life and I have a good time nonetheless. I keep things positive for the most part, but when you sort of sit down to it and think, what's going on with myself, that's when I sometimes overthink things, and it can get a bit messy. But what was a great thing at that point was that even though I went to LA to look for stuff, and as we found out, the scene out there was, although we mentioned earlier, it was cool. To go out there as a musician, you've just got to live. You've got to have lived there from when you were young. I think, you know, like if I'd have lived there, how I am and how I was when I was 20, I can't help feel that I would probably be at the top of my game in a massive band now.
I absolutely
You know?
agree. I absolutely agree. I can't help but think the same for me. You know, I always wondered if that was the case. Absolutely, we would be making a living out of music somehow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that, you know, I've been fortunate enough that I am by far, I'm not the best guitarist in the world. I'm not the best drummer in the world. But I think what I deliver in a band is the right thing for the band I'm in. And I think I'm a nice enough person to be around. I get on very well with lots of people, almost everybody I meet. So I think, like, you know, like we just said, if we're there from a young age. So when I came back from LA and I was just all like confused because I'd obviously got away and, you know, my wife was here. Obviously, no problem with our relationship. I've left her here by herself not long after us getting married, so I can go and pursue this thing in my 30s to try and do something that really I should, if I was going to do it, I should have done when I was 20. All felt like a confusing. My head was just all over the place, you know. Luckily, she supported me the whole way through, and it actually helped strengthen even more our marriage, really, because she was there for me that whole time. And like most people would have fucking freaked out. You know, I'm going to quit my job and go to LA. You know? It's not what people want to hear 1 year after getting married, is it? You know, so I respect her massively that she was cool about that. But yeah, it was just a weird, confusing time. But I remember coming back and someone said, "What's it like in LA for the music thing?" I said, "You know what? If an 18, 19, 20-year-old came up to me and said, Ollie, I'm thinking about going out to LA. You know, you've come back. You didn't seem to come and get anything from it. Would you recommend I go?" I'd be like, "You 100% should go right now. You shouldn't even talk about it anymore. Book your tickets and go without thinking about it anymore, you know?"
100%.
Because if you're there from a younger age and you just go out there and accept the fact you're going to have to go and get a shit job and play in covers bands maybe for a few weeks, for a few months, maybe for a year. But just by being there, being a man on the ground in that city, I just cannot see how, if you're a decent, solid musician and a decent, solid guy, how you can't make it. You know?
Yeah.
And I think the age I went out, I mean, I can't even think what that would have been. Maybe I was 34, maybe when I went out. Fuck me, if I'd have gone out when I was 20, 14 years of working like I had been here in that place, as I say, I would have been shocked had I not been earning, like you say, somehow, some way, a living from music, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. I always think that when I moved to London 10 years ago, if I had moved to LA with all the drive and all the enthusiasm and everything that I brought with me 10 years ago, things could have been different. But then that's a bit of a waste of time as well, isn't it? To just waste of energy, not a waste of time, waste of energy to keep pondering about things that, oh, it could have happened. What would have happened if I have had done this or that? You know, it's
Yeah, the point is, you didn't, and you've had a great ride ever since, isn't it? That's really the focus. I didn't move there when I was 19, but I've had a great life ever since, and I got to do that stuff with Iron Maiden. You know,
exactly.
If I'd have gone to LA, I wouldn't have done it. Okay, it could have been something as cool as, not quite as cool as, but I'm not complaining about the experiences I did get. You know.
Absolutely. Well, because at the end of the day, that's what life is all about, isn't it? There's no guarantees. The only guarantee is that one day we won't be here anymore.
Yeah.
And one day you're at the top, and one day, and being at the top, what does it mean? You know, I mean, some people will say that what you lived at the time, you know, touring the world, that was being at the top, you know. But I'm pretty sure that you are at the top right now. You know, you've got a job. You're married to someone that is extremely supportive to yourself. You guys just bought a house, And do you know what I mean? Like for some people, even for myself, that sounds like a very far away dream, you know, being married to someone amazing and buying my first house. So it's all about perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I do feel, you know, not in an arrogant way or anything, but I am very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. Do you know what I mean? And I am grateful for it every day, you know. And I'm grateful for every part of the experience I've had. Like I say, when I probably first met you, I was not as grateful every day. I was I was pissed off. You know, I was like I felt life wasn't fair. You know, and I'm not that kind of person. I wasn't that kind of person before. I haven't been that person since. But at that point, I was really, life isn't fair. But like you say, it's all about perspective, because life was fucking fair. I just had the most incredible couple of years, you know, that people would have given anything to have, you know.
Absolutely.
And you can get very, like, the dark cloud over you can sometimes shadow everything else, can't it? And but yeah, overall, absolutely very grateful, and you know, I can't complain about anything, you know. And also, I'm playing a great band now, Wicked Stone, and we get like a great deal of attention and love, and we do some great gigs. And I'm very fortunate that really I've got a good balance, which is the next challenge in life, really, of balancing out how you manage everything in life without
Yeah, and I think
parts
that's
of it, you know.
and I think that's a very good thing as well. You keep playing in the band. You've got a band, and you never know tomorrow. You never know tomorrow what can happen tomorrow. It's just you can't rule things out, you know.
That's right. You got to keep your mind open to anything, haven't you? And where I was, 2012, all I could see the future was just dull and not what I wanted to be. And as I say, I felt pissed off. You know, and I'm ashamed to have felt that way. You know, I'm embarrassed to admit that, but you know, that's how I was for a time. But what was amazing was in 2000 and what year was it? 2016. So was it 16? Yeah, 2016. Wicked Stone got asked to play at Rambling Man Festival. So we were on the unsigned stage, right? So I've been to LA, I come back, I've then got another job, which I do now, a job that for the first time in my life, I really enjoy. I'm a kitchen designer. No idea that I'd ever be doing that in my life, you know?
You're a kitchen designer.
That's my job. I'm a kitchen designer.
Man,
So, yeah.
how did that happen? That's amazing.
I know, but a friend. It sounds like how does that happen? When I tell you, it's just very simple. A really great friend of mine, you know, one of my best buds from years gone by, kind of thing. You know, I've known him since I was at school. His family run a kitchen business, an independent kitchen business, selling really lovely German kitchens. And he said, "We're looking for a kitchen designer, and we want to train someone who knows nothing about it, because we don't want someone that's been trained from another company that then we have to undo the work to then retrain them to how we want them to be. We want someone who's completely fresh." And it's just funny how life works out, isn't it? Because you're like, okay, well, I can say yes, I can do the job, and I know fuck all about it. You know, and that it's not often you can say that that's the best qualification, that you know nothing about the job. You know. So then I did that, and as I say, like, I'm 2 years down the line of that already, and like other jobs where I've got 18 months down the line or 2 years, and you start going, oh man, I can't do this forever. What am I going to do now? I don't feel that way. So I'm very grateful that I don't feel that way, because I enjoy it.
That's really good.
It's really cool. And then, so that was March 2016. But then a couple of months later, you know, I'm playing in Wicked Stone. We're doing, you know, we've recorded some stuff with my bro Oz Craggs in Folkestone, who's got a studio, Hidden Track Studios, and that's an incredible place. And then you release stuff, and then you're playing Rambling Man, and okay, we're first on the Sunday on the unsigned thing. So I kind of go into that. With my experience, I know what support slots or festivals can be like. You can play to thousands, or you can play to like 10 people, you know, and the build up to it can be, you think, we're playing at this festival, it's going to be amazing. And then you play to 10 people, and it's a bit like, it can be a bit like disheartening. But we were first band on, and what was amazing was that the unsigned stage in that year, I don't know, I presume it's still the same, was right by the main entrance. So when people were coming in, they would stop and watch, and they liked what they saw. So the crowd over the next 40 minutes we played gathered and gathered and gathered, and we had this amazing gig, and we picked up a bunch of fans from that gig that are still, you know, with us now. Obviously came to our album release in October and all that kind of thing, and we've gathered the fans since. But But my point being is that I'm standing there, and I thought about it during the gig as I'm playing. I never would have imagined this happening again. In 2012, when everything came to an end, I thought, well, I do the covers band, and that was, as I say, like, you feel like a millionaire. You turn up, you might get 40 or 50 quid pocket money,
Yeah.
and you feel good for it, and you have a gig, you have a good time, and you play music, and it's enjoyable. But then all of a sudden, you're an original, you're doing your own music, and you're playing this kind of festival, and you think, fuck me, man, 5 years ago when I was feeling low, I never imagined it, and here you are, and it still can happen. So it's coming back to what you just said. You never know what tomorrow brings,
And that's really amazing. I think it's seriously something. It's just amazing because you gosh, wow, you managed to kind of like put everything together somehow again. You've got a band that you're proud of. They play with friends, which is great. Good music, well produced, and you get to play festivals again. Like you did at Ramblin', and life is just it's just, I would say, somehow perfect in many ways, right? Obviously that's an utopia. Nothing is ever entirely perfect. We always strive for more. We always want more. We always look at things like, oh, this could be better. But yeah, that's just life. That's just life.
Yeah, and I think there's two ways of looking at that as well, because you can look at that as a negative thing, in that you're never happy because you always want something else, which is the negative way of looking at it. Or the positive way is everything is perfect. Why not make it more perfect? Why not make it even better? Why not add something else to the mix that makes you even happier? And that's not a bad thing. And I think really as humans, we've got that in us, haven't we? That we strive for more. We need that to keep us going. If you sit there and coast and settle, that's when things get difficult, because that's when you're accepting of things that might not always be ideal, rather than aiming for something better or aiming to perfect something. Even if it's things like, people, exercise, like you and your running, you didn't always go running.
Yeah.
And now you do, and now it's a massive part of your life, and it doesn't put you on stage in front of thousands of people, but that's irrelevant, isn't it? It's adding another bow to another element to your life that you now love. You've met amazing people from it. You've gained great experiences. You've seen other places in the world, by going to do different marathons in different countries.
Absolutely.
And you never would have thought, when there's times maybe you were frustrated in different bands, that you would get such a great boost to your life by running.
Exactly.
You just would never have occurred to you,
100%, my friend. Wow, Olly, this has been amazing, man. This is super, like, it's great content. I think you sharing your story, so many people can relate to it in many different levels. I certainly can relate, obviously, because of so many things in common that we share, like music and passions and beliefs, and well, hence why we're friends. We're still friends after all. And I loved it. I really want to just now get to try and get to wrap up this conversation in good spirits. So I'm gonna have some roller coaster questions for you, my friends. Here they come.
Do these vary between people, or are they the same questions?
No. The roller coaster questions are basically same. I do those questions to all my guests, all of them. All of them get to answer them somehow. So yeah. But seriously, this I can tell that, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure we could stay here for another hour with you sharing experiences and talking. And I'm sure this is not going to be you definitely going to be again on the podcast. I'm really positive, and hopefully we're going to do it a live one, like face to face, sharing a beer here in London.
Man, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, man, it's been a while.
Cool. Let's go for the first one then. Do you have or follow any morning routines, rituals?
Yeah, rushing around trying to get out. quicker than I should be, quicker than I knew. No, I've got to be honest. I'm not very good. I'm not a very good morning person. I sort of I kind of gather speed and momentum as the day goes on, really. So I'm probably better in the mornings than I used to be. But quite honestly, I allow myself just enough time to get up, shower, eat breakfast, get dressed, brush my teeth, and leave.
And
That's literally
what do you normally have for breakfast? Do you
what I
have
normally have for breakfast. It's a mixture of as humans, we kind of get into our little routines, don't we? So I work Monday to Friday all day and Saturday mornings, but I get every other Wednesday off to make up for the Saturday mornings. So Monday to Friday, I have a mixture, depending on how I feel, of either Weetabix or Special K. And on Saturday mornings, as a little treat, I have crunchy nut cornflakes.
Oh wow, there you go.
and on my Wednesday, my every other Wednesday off, I also have crunchy nut cornflakes as the treat.
Man, I loved it. This is great. with what did you have with milk?
Yeah, just semi-skim milk. Washed down with a bit of pineapple juice.
Man, amazing. And what do you normally eat for lunch? Do you eat at home? How does it? Do you take home? Do you like have packed lunch from home or?
No, the place I work is really close to Sainsbury's, so I go and get like rolls, and I either have ham and tomato or chicken and tomato, or sometimes, again, if I'm sort of feeling particularly hungry, I go and get those quite unhealthy, I suppose, sandwich filler things. You can get coronation chicken ones and egg and bacon ones, so I kind of chuck a load of that crap into a couple of rolls, and then and then feel guilty. So I always finish that off with an apple to try and make me feel like I've done something.
Oh my goodness,
something
that's
healthy
great.
with my day.
Bro, what's your spiritual practice, if any at all?
Well, I'm an atheist, so I have no beliefs of any god or anything like that. My belief is, though, that there is some energy that works in the universe. I just don't understand how it does. But I think it's the kind of thing where if it's on a vibrational level or something like that, that if you're throwing out the positive thoughts, they're going to come back to you. Or if you're, when you aim for something, that you can align everything you're doing, your thoughts and feelings, you will kind of get there, It depends if you're going to block that with any negativity. But I did try, and again, this is a bit like coming back a minute ago when I said about, that you add other things to your life. So it's not a bad thing. It's not that you're unhappy, but you just kind of want to better yourself or that kind of thing. I did go for a short period of time, only very short, where I was trying to get into mindfulness. But you know what? Life just, it's an excuse, but life gets in the way. I'm busy because I've played in those 3 different bands, and I have rehearsals, obviously, with those bands, and obviously I'm married and I work and I'm busy with work and all those kind of things. But there is no excuse to not do mindfulness, by the way. And,
Oh man, I'll tell you something. I've been delaying myself into that as well. I delayed myself, I should say, into mindfulness, into meditation for a long while. But since I'm super happy to say that since last October, I've been meditating religiously every single morning. Obviously, that during the last several months, I might have missed a Saturday or a Sunday or one day here and there. But as a general rule, that's one of the very first things I do in the morning. I've been meditating anything between 10 and 20 minutes. And I think people do get frustrated because people expect something to come out of it. Oh, something is going to happen. I'm going to see something. I'm going to feel something. Something's going to change drastically in my life because now I am this yogi type of person. But I think the benefits are like super somehow well hidden, but you start to be a bit more. You just basically rewire your brain in many ways. You observe your thoughts. Sometimes you just. I personally get myself like thinking about wasting energy, wasting my brain with thoughts sometimes that just going in on loops. We all do. And when you start observing that, when you start to kind of like breaking that pathway, you I don't know, there's an evolution to it. You do evolve from it. You do become I think a more conscious person somehow. And I think it's a lifelong journey. It's nothing that you will do. Okay, I've been practicing this for a year, now I'm at this stage kind of
No,
situation.
no, sure. It's not necessarily very measurable, is it?
It's not
The
measurable.
way when you're running, for example, that if you run 10K and you
Yeah.
run it quicker the next time, you know you've achieved something, don't you?
Exactly.
The thing is, when I tried to get into it, it wasn't like I tried but failed. I tried and enjoyed it, and I really liked the feeling of it. But it became one of those things where you do it today, you do it tomorrow, you don't do it the next day because your day is just chaos. And all of a sudden you can be out the habit of doing it, and then a week goes by, you go, oh, I must do that again. But it's obviously it's a discipline, which you've obviously done to actually make yourself do it. And the joke of it is, the things I've read, and obviously you're going to know a lot more about it than me because you're actually doing it regularly. So sometimes you don't have to do like an hour or 30 minutes. Sometimes you can just do 3 minutes of mindfulness.
Exactly.
And
that's it.
And you've achieved something for the day that you by not doing it, you haven't achieved.
I never do any longer than 20 minutes. Sometimes
No,
it's
exactly.
10 minutes. Sometimes more. Very, very often it's 15 minutes. Sometimes it's 16. Sometimes it's 17. Sometimes it's 20. As long as you sit down quietly and just pay attention on your breathing, try to kind of like create a gap between one thought and the next, and observe your mind. Whatever it takes, like if you can spare 5 minutes, great. But that's the thing, you gotta create that time. If even if on your case it's gonna be quite difficult, but even if it's meant to wake up 5 or 10 minutes earlier, get out of the bed 10 minutes earlier in order to create that space, because that's exactly what I did. I started to, okay, the only way to get this done is getting myself out of bed, whatever, 15 minutes, 20 minutes earlier than the usual. And at first it's a bit like, oh man, no, I can't do that. I can't spare 20 minutes of my sleep to do. But then, it just becomes part of your life basically, and then you get used to it. Instead of waking up at 7 o'clock, you get up at 6:45, and after a few weeks it just becomes the norm. And yeah, it is really good. I totally support that, and I definitely think it would be a great addition for your daily morning routines, I would say.
Absolutely. And as I say, even though I say I'm busy, I can't. It's not. I'm not too busy to do it, because I still find time to do fucking bullshit stuff like look on Facebook for too long every single day and looking at nonsense that people are posting that I don't really need to do.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating thing. And I get into, again, like lots of us do, you get into this silly cycle of doing shit like that on your phone, flicking through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things that I changed. I mean, I realized how much I was spending, how much time I was spending checking and scrolling things on Instagram and Facebook and all that social media, which I still do, but I changed and I created a few rules, personal rules for myself. So, for example, in the morning before my alarm, I use my iPhone alarm. So my alarm would go off, and then I would grab my phone and I would open my eyes and I would start checking the social media, and then I would spend 20-25 minutes sometimes, checking social media in bed, and then before I knew, I was already, my brain was wired up, my thoughts were like everywhere. And that's basically how I started the day, and that's how a lot of people actually start their days. And then I basically stopped doing that. So nowadays I get out of bed, my alarm goes off, my phone is on airplane mode, Wi-Fi is off, I get off bed, and then I go do my thing in the toilet, breakfast, meditation. Then just after all that, that's when I get my phone. That's when I, take out of airplane mode, check everything I have to check, and then I sit down the phone and try to not look at it. I have notifications off. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you're like a bit anxious to, know what's happening on people's lives. like family and stuff. I have a WhatsApp group with my family members, so people keep messaging me there. And but more often than I than used to be, at least, I see myself not touching the phone as much as I did before. And then at night, same procedure. When I leave work, because I normally leave work around 10 p.m. I try not to look at my phone, because at the end of the day, there's nothing. Well, I know myself that I'm not expecting anything urgent, and there's no emergencies that I will have to actually have access to my phone. And if I have to, then a person will call me or text me. So I don't open my WhatsApp, and I don't check Facebook, and I try and not do that. And it's really good, man. It does a lot of good to your sanity, I would say. Right, this is a tricky one. What would someone who doesn't like you, and I can't imagine that, but who doesn't like you, say about you, brother? That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. Crikey. Well, you stumped me for the first time on this conversation. What would they not like about me? Yeah. Yeah, do you know what? Okay, I think that sometimes, I think I'm polite when I speak my mind, but sometimes people don't like to hear when you speak your mind, So if I believe in something, I'll stand up and I will be diplomatic about it and say, listen, I don't think this is fair or right. If you go against people like that, sometimes some people can be like, man, I totally agree with you. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad I now think of things that way. Other people are a little bit more strong-headed, and they don't like their thought process or way of thinking to be fucked with. And I think that might be, there's probably a couple of people from the past that maybe maybe would have a disliking for me for that. And it makes it sound like I'm the kind of guy that goes around, I go and tell people the truth whether they like it or not. I'm not that kind of person, because I think it's rude when people are like that. But if it's like a debate about something that you're talking about, whether, as I say, generally music or something like that, when I say music, I'm just talking about when you're in a band or your creative conversation, shall we say. I think that might be the only thing that people would have had trouble with. Yeah. Where you kind of, someone's strong-headed and they've got like this is the way it's going to be, and I'm like, well, I don't think that's going to be the best way to do it, because if we do that, then this blah blah blah, and I think that would, as I say, it fucks with people's way of thinking.
I get ya. What kind of food do you go for when in need of a treat? What do you like? Obviously, with Sarah, you probably share with her. You know what? Let's go. Let's be cheeky tonight. Let's have, I don't know, pizza, burgers, mac and whatever. What would be the treat for you? Okay, I'm gonna treat myself. I know that you treat yourself now on Wednesdays and Saturdays during breakfast. But let's go a little bit crazier here.
I reckon. Well, Chinese. I'm a bit of a sucker for Chinese takeaway. But you know what? I was thinking this the other day, and I mention this from time to time. You can never go wrong with pizza. There's something about pizza, just that sheer quantity of melted cheese over bread with lovely toppings on. I'm a sucker for it. So, like, I think I used the line the other day, even bad pizza is better than no pizza. So
I agree.
So I think I probably would have to say that pizza is probably the very base level go-to treat, that will always keep me happy.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. Right, and one more. What are you reading at the moment, if anything at all? Or what books have you gifted most?
The kind of books I read of more recent times are not so much fiction books or anything like that. They'll be kind of almost like, self-improvement kind of books, I've read a couple recently by a guy called Brian Tracy. I don't know if you've heard of that guy.
No, I haven't.
You should look him up, man. You'd appreciate that.
Brian?
That guy, I think.
Say it again.
Brian Tracy, yeah.
Okay.
And he's just got like, my favorite book by him is a book called Goals. So it's literally just about the motivation you have to go for what you need to go for, And it's not just one of those kind of books of like, go for, live your dreams and, everything's going to be all good. It's just a very clear way of like, when you get up today, what are you doing towards your biggest goal? What are you doing every single day that drives you closer to achieving the things you need to achieve,
Yeah.
And he's very good at breaking it down and very good at kind of giving ways of setting your targets and those kind of things. So I would recommend that. So that's my recent reading.
Amazing. I'll have a look into Brian Tracy then, my friend.
Yeah, man, I can thoroughly recommend.
Olly, brother, thank you so very much for this conversation, man.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Very, very nice. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm very positive that a lot of people will relate to your life story, which is just starting. Because as we were saying earlier on, we are 35 years old, and I'm sure we're gonna live way longer. We're gonna double that at the very least. And lots of other things, lots of other great things will come your way. I'm absolutely sure of that. And I truly hope to see you sometime soon. Whenever you come to London, please let me know, and we shall do this again at